everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Rachel and this is Stitched Up. So today's video is going to be my experimentation with Russian patterns. So I am always on the lookout for something a little bit exciting, a little bit different. And yeah, Russian patterns were sort of highlighted to me by the lovely Alex from Gingerhead & Co. And I've always steered away from them, mainly because of the language barrier, and some of the Russian pattern companies don't always have English translation, which makes things doubly difficult. The Cyrillic alphabet is not easy to translate at all. So yeah, I didn't think I was experienced enough to have a go, but I've seen some amazing patterns out there and they are at unbelievable prices. So I decided I was just going to experiment and have a little go, and I thought you'd like to see how I got along with it. Well, this is the blouse that I have made. The interesting thing about Russian patterns is that they draft for the height that you are, which is really good for me, because normally with most patterns I have to lengthen everything because I'm 5'10", and yeah, it's a real novelty not having to do that. So it does take a little bit of getting your head around what the Russian sizes are compared to European and UK sizes, and learning about how to choose your size. Really, it's not as straightforward as what you think, and I think again that puts a lot of people off. The other thing as well is that some of the pattern companies have you adding seam allowances, some are already included, and I know a lot of people just want straightforward ease of, you know, picking a pattern up, tracing it off or cutting it out and just getting on and sewing. The instructions aren't always really detailed as well, which obviously makes things just a little bit more difficult, but I thought you would like to just sew along with me today to see how I got on getting this blouse together. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out, and I will insert some pictures at the end so you can have a look. But yeah, let's get started. Okay, so I'm on the patterneasy.com website, which is a Russian pattern magazine website that the lovely Alex, who is Gingerhead & Co, signposted me to, and I've translated it into English, which most of your Google Translate type applications will do, and I've created my own account. So if you go to pattern catalogue first, okay, and then the patterns are all categorized into different garments. So we've got dresses, blouses and tops, skirts, trousers, outerwear, accessories, underwear for pregnant, men's, babies, teenagers. So I'm just going to look at blouses and tops first, and then I really love this jumper. I think this jumper is gorgeous, but we're coming into spring, so it's probably not the best time. I think the only thing that I find a little bit awkward to look at on this website is the prices. It doesn't actually tell you, but Russian patterns tend to be very inexpensive. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of the pages to this particular blouse here, which is the ready-made blouse pattern in a romantic style. It comes in sizes 36 to 64. Now that obviously doesn't mean anything to you at the moment. However, these are Russian sizes, so we'll have a look at that in a second. But if you click on it, I really like this. You've got a line drawing here, which shows you it's like a raglan sleeve blouse with a I can't remember what type of collar this is called, and front button placket with ruffles on the sleeves, and then this ruffle that's inset into the raglan at the front, and then the back is plain. Looks like there's a couple of, is there a little pleat going into the neckline there? And you've got a picture of it on the model there, and I really like it. I just think it's really pretty, very feminine, be lovely for spring. So to determine your size and height, because it comes in all these sizes and then different heights as well. Now I know my height, I am 178, which Pattern Easy don't go up to, but some of the other pattern sites such as Viki Sews and Grasser do. But 176 will be fine. It's only a couple of centimetres shorter than my height. So the other bit, the actual size, is what we need to look at. So if we look at this bit here where it says how to determine your size, and essentially on this particular website it gives you, for size 46 for instance, it tells you that this growth is 158, which is the height. So I need to pick 176 because that's the tallest that they do. And then you've got measurements such as semi-girth of the neck, which I don't find particularly useful. Semi-girth of the chest, which is half the chest, so half the bust circumference, which is 46. So if you double that up, which is 92, and then I put that into a calculator here, which gives me a bust of 36 inches. Because these measurements are in centimetres. My full bust is 35, and at this stage I don't know what the ease is. So I'm going to go with this particular size, the 46. Half waist, 35.6. So if we put that into the calculator, no, that's not right. Half waist, 35.6, so you have to double it, which is 71.2, which gives you a waist of 28 inches. Mine is 27, so again, I think I'm going to go with this size. You've also got some extra measurements here, such as your half hip. Again, you need to double that up. Back length, front waist length, shoulder length, etc. I've not done any of those, but this is the size I'm going to go with, the 46. And then on this particular website as well, you can have a look at the sewing instructions before you purchase. So I'll just get rid of that. So, which is quite useful. So it tells you a little bit. I mean, obviously the translation is not perfect. For instance, here it says constructive additions to this model to the chest circumference of 3.5 centimetres to hip circumference of 6 centimetres. My interpretation of that is that's the amount of ease that is allocated on top of the body measurements when you're choosing the size. So it's going to give me a nice little bit of ease there, because 3.5 centimetres onto that bust size of 36 is 39.5, and my bust is 35, so I should have sorry, no, that's in inches, isn't it? What's that, 1.5 inches? Just under 1.5 inches of ease. So you don't get a lot of ease in these patterns. It's something to sort of be aware of. It also tells you recommendations for fabrics. So to make this blouse, you'll need a basic material from the group of shirt or dress fabrics containing silk fibres and threads easily draped. So you're looking at your drapey fabrics, so things such as crepes, viscoses, maybe a viscose twill if it's a lightweight one, perhaps cotton lawns as well. I've got tons of viscoses in my stash, so I think that's probably what I'm going to go with. And it should tell you how much fabric you will need as well. So it gives you instructions on printing. I'm pretty sure it does tell you somewhere. Thought it did. I did read somewhere. It might be further down. And then obviously it's got the pattern pieces here. And interesting translations for the pattern pieces. The flounces on here are called shuttlecocks, which is, I often wonder if international people that speak different languages, if the translation from English into their language is sometimes quite hilarious. It often tickles me. Anyway, here we go. So when cutting parts, it is necessary to add seam allowances along all connecting cuts of the blouse, 1 centimetre, along the upper cut of the rack. So it doesn't actually tell you what the rack is when I've looked at all these pattern pieces, but I'm assuming it's the top neckline that attaches to the collar. that would be what would make most sense to me. So along the upper cut of the rack, 7 to 8 millimeters, the seam allowance along the lower cuts of the shuttlecocks, so that's the hems of the flounces, depends on the selected processing method. So I guess for that it means depends on what type of hem finish you're going to do. Along the lower cut of the blouse, so that's the bottom hem, a seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters. So I need to add seam allowances to all these pattern pieces. The approximate consumption of material with a width of at least 150 centimeters is 1.2 to 1.5 meters, so it doesn't actually use a lot. For this model, the change in material consumption is influenced not by size as usual, but by growth. So obviously height, the taller you are, you're going to need more. So I'm going to probably need about 1.5. The most rational scheme for the layout of the parts and the material in the fold are shown in the figure. All parts of the product are paired, etc, etc. So essentially I've bought this pattern. It's very easy. You can pay by PayPal. So if I go into my account here, and you've got the option of how to print the pattern, to look at that, printing on an A4 printer, or plotting, so that's your AO if you want to send it off to a printers to be printed. The PDF for this blouse is only 15 pages though, so it literally takes 5-10 minutes to stick together. And then the sewing instructions, so if you click on this, it actually brings up the sewing instructions and translates it on the page to English, which is fantastic. Further down here you can pull up a PDF document, but that obviously won't be translated. When I do that, it just opens up in Russian, which I can't read. So I'm probably not going to print the instructions out. I think I will just refer to them from my actual laptop, and then I think that will be fairly straightforward. So here is the printed A4 pattern. I chose the size 46 with the height of 176, so this should fit me. I shouldn't have to make any adjustments whatsoever. I just need to remember that I do need to add seam allowances to all of these. And the way it's nested, if you look, obviously there isn't a lot of room here. There's certainly not enough for 1 centimetre between each of these pattern pieces. So I'm going to cut these out first, and then I will have to stick some extra paper around these edges, remembering that the edges that are on the fold obviously don't need a seam allowance, because that's going to be on the fold. And I think I'm probably just going to add 1 centimetre to the whole lot, apart from the folded edges. I'm not going to worry about the bottom hem and the upper cut rack business, or whatever it was, where I think that's where it's going to go into this little collar here. But I might add a little bit extra on at the bottom hem, because I think a bit of a wider hem might be better. So we'll get this cut out. Now the interesting thing on the actual PDF that's cut out, it does give you the pattern pieces in English. So it gives me the name of the pattern, romantic style blouse, and then here for instance it says back sleeve ×2, and if you remember, it referred on the website to the flounces as shuttlecocks, but here it actually calls them flounce sleeves ×2, I would assume. The front yoke flounce here is ×2. However, what you need to think about is your fabric choice, because if you choose a fabric where the reverse side of your fabric isn't the same as the front side, so you know, for those fabrics that are printed on rather than actually sometimes the reverse size is lighter in colour. That's what I'm trying to say. You've got to remember with the flounce that that's going to show. So I think what I'm probably going to do is, instead of cutting 2 out of each of the flounces, I'm going to cut 4, and then I'm going to join them right sides together, turn them out the right way, so that you've got the facing side is the right side of the fabric as well as the right side of the fabric. It will make sense. It will make sense when I get this sewn up. So let's get this cut out. Still haven't chosen any fabric actually, so I'm going to go and have a look in my stash. I want to choose probably a fabric that I've got 1.5 to 2 meters of, that I probably didn't know what I was going to do with, and then we'll have a go at getting this together. Right, so I've cut out the pattern. So I have the back blouse piece, the front piece with the placket in, and the front and back raglan sleeve, and then I've got the flounces there, and this is the collar. So I've chosen the fabric. This is what I've chosen from my stash. This is, it's very poly based, to be honest, but this is a fairly loose fit blouse, so I think it'll be fine. No idea where I got this from. I've had this in my stash probably about 3 or 4 years now, but I think it'll be great for toweling this. So as you can see, I have included seam allowance in some of the pattern pieces, and I'm going to use that as a guide to cutting the fabric out, because I think, as I mentioned, the way the pattern was printed meant that I couldn't cut 1 centimetre all the way around. So I'm just going to neaten those up and then use that as a guide by eye, because my eye is pretty good, to be fair. But you know, if you haven't got a good eye for your seam allowance, then you are going to need to add that on either to your pattern or to the fabric when you're cutting it out. Yeah, and then I'm going to get this pinned to the pattern and then cut out. I have cut out all my pattern pieces now, and I'm just looking at the instructions, and you do get the instructions on Pattern Easy patterns in English, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure how useful they are. So it mentions what you need, as in, if I just have a look here, in addition to the main material, your main fabric, you are going to need hot glue cushioning material for duplicating the rack and allowance for the processing of the fastener, adhesive non-woven thin. So that means interfacing. So I have interfaced the plackets where the button band and button stand are going to be, and also the collar stand as well. You're also going to need buttons as well, lace braid if the lace is going to be used along the edge of the flounce. However, I am not using lace. What I've done actually is I've cut 2, instead of cutting 2 of both of the flounces, I've cut 4 so that I don't have to edge it. I'm going to have it wrong sides together so that the seams are fully enclosed. So I'll show you how I do that in a little while. And obviously threads as well. So then we come to the stitching instructions, and I'll be honest, I've read these and a lot of it doesn't make sense. So the first thing, bond the adhesive cushioning material, i.e. interfacing, to the wrong side of the top rack. Now I'm assuming that means the collar. If you want to get a stiffer shape but also glue the adhesive on the wrong side of the bottom post, not sure what that means, but essentially I have interfaced one of the collar stand pieces but not the other. I've left the other without interfacing. But again, if you want that really stiff effect, I guess you can interface both pieces, but again it depends on the fabric that you're using. I'm using a poly fabric that is quite like viscose really. Next, bond the adhesive backing material to the wrong side of the seam allowance. Now I don't know the seam allowance of what. I have basically only interfaced the button placket and button stand because I don't think there's anything else on this blouse that you are going to need to interface. I certainly haven't interfaced the seam allowances of all the pattern pieces because they're not necessary. Stitch the darts on the shelves on large sizes, iron the darts. Now, dependent on the size you make, if you look at the diagram here, you are going to have a dart in the front bodice pieces. Now, on the size that I'm doing, there's no dart there, but obviously, you know, if you've got more of a bust than I have, more of a full bust, there may be a dart on the pattern piece. So obviously that means stitch that dart, but that's the step that I need to omit because there isn't a dart on my pattern pieces. So the next is mark the seam allowance along the marked line. Sew on the sewing allowance for the front closure, iron on. So I'm assuming this means the button stand. So it's essentially going to be sewing the, pressing the button stand in place and basting across the top and bottom, which I'll show you how we do that. So we're going to do that first. Then it says overcast and stitch the sleeves at the side cuts. iron the allowances. So I'm assuming that means, if we just look at the diagram again of the actual blouse, I'm assuming it means this bit here. So we've got this front bit here of the raglan, and then the front bodice pieces. So I'm assuming, if you just ignore the front flounce bit for now, it means overcasting this edge of both the shoulder part of the raglan sleeve and the front bodice piece. So we'll do that next. Then grind the upper strut of the lower one along the departure and ends. I have no idea what that means. Turn the stand to the right side, iron on. Okay, so finish the bottom of the front flounces and sleeve flounces. Well, we're doing ours, I've doubled up and going to do right sides together. Variant of processing the lower cut of the flounces depends on the type of lace braid. So I think that means dependent on how you're going to finish the flounce hem depends on what type of finishing of lace, if you're going to use lace. Essentially, I think that's what that means. No idea what this diagram is. Base the right shuttlecock to the right shelf and the left shuttlecock to the left shelf. These are the front flounces. Along the cut of the armhole, stitch the shuttlecocks at a distance of 5mm from the cut. Sew the sleeves along the middle cuts. Sweep the slices. Press the seam allowances on the back of the sleeves. Okay, knit and stitch the folds along the top of the sleeves. That's the little pleats in the top of the sleeves, so I think you just gather those in a little bit, these little bits here. Where are we? What else? Stitch the sleeves along the hem, neaten the sections, press seam allowance, base and stitch the flounces to the sleeves, sweep the slices. Sweep the slices, I think, essentially means snipping into the curve so that you get it to lie flat. So yeah, it's a bit, you know, the steps are quite brief, but also in, you know, translated literally into English from Russian, which obviously doesn't always make a lot of sense, but you can sort of figure it out. But we're going to do our own thing, and I'll show you how we'll get this blouse put together. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to stitch the button plackets. I have interfaced these, as we've already discussed, and I need to trim that interfacing off there. However, what we're going to do is we're going to fold. You should have a little, there's a little notch here, which is this one here, and I'm basically going to fold this over twice. So I'm going to fold it over at that notch and press, and then fold it over again, and then that's going to give me my button stand and button placket. I'm going to do that on both pieces first. So I have folded over the plackets. This is looking at the front blouse pieces from the wrong side, and they've been double folded over. So one side is going to be the button placket, the other will be the button stand. Going to top stitch this edge all the way down, so we'll take that to the sewing machine. I'm probably going to do that on a 3mm stitch length, and yeah, we'll get that done first. Right, so once you've done that, what we need to do next is we're going to look at the flounces for the front bodice pieces. So the instructions tell you to cut 2 and then hem them however you want, or add a bit of lace or whatever, but I have cut 4 because, yeah, I'm going to stitch these right sides together along this curved edge here and then turn it out so that it's wrong sides together, so the seam is encased before we attach to this front raglan of the front bodice. So we'll get that done and then show you how that looks. So they are sewn together, and what I did was I sewed the flounces wrong sides together, trimmed down the seam, turned them the right way out so they're now wrong sides together, and then I pressed the seam, and then I have top stitched around it. So what we need to do now is attach these to the front raglan bodice, and I am assuming it goes like so. You do need to match the notches, so there is a little notch on the bodice there and on the front flounce there. Like so. And then what we're going to do now is we're just going to go baste both edges at the sewing machine. Right, so once they're basted in position, it should look something like that. And then what I've got now is I have got the front sleeve. So we now need to attach, is that way? I've got to figure out how this goes now. That way, isn't it? Yeah. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. So I'm hoping that's right, I think, because then that's going to go like that. That needs to be brought in for the little pleat detail at the top, and that's going to go around the armhole. So we'll stitch that on and hope for the best. Right, so when it's done, it should hopefully look something like that. We've got the raglan on, we've got the little front flounce onto the front bodice, and we're going to now look at the back bodice piece, which is here, and we are going to attach the back sleeve piece to the back bodice. So right sides together again, I think they're going to go like so. We'll match the notch and pin in place. So we'll go and stitch this with our 1 centimetre seam allowance. Raglans are on the back bodice, and I have finished off the seams on my overlocker. So what I'm going to do now is attach the front bodice pieces right side together at the shoulder edge along the raglan bit there, and move that out of the way, and there as well. So we're going to pin both those shoulder seams together, front and back, and stitch and then finish the seams on the overlocker. Right, I just wanted to show you how to do the pleat detail at the top. I'm assuming that just folds over on itself, right sides together. Well, this is how I'm doing it anyway. I'm sure somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. This fabric is really fiddly to work with. Ugh. There we go. Just bob a pin in there, and then I'm going to stitch along this edge here at 1 centimetre seam allowance, which is what I added on. And then that should create that little sort of curve that goes over the shoulder, pleat that goes into the shoulder. So I've just been looking at this little pleat detail that we've created on the front raglan, and I think how this goes is it folds back on itself like that. I hope you can see that, but I'm assuming that's how it goes so that you get that nice straight edge. I'll bring it closer. So I think, you know, the raglan that you've stitched here, you fold back. That's what I'm going to do anyway, and then I'm going to stitch across there, and it will give that nice pleat detail on the front raglan. Okay, so the shoulders are now stitched in place, and it's starting to look like that. So what we need to do next is, I think we need to stay stitch the full neck edge, so, and obviously trim all this extra bits and pieces off. And then we've got the collar to attach, so I think we will do that next, create the collar. I haven't stitched up the side seams yet, as you can see, because we need to do the flounce, and I think the flounce is probably better off being done on the flat, so we will see how we get on with that. I don't know yet, I haven't decided, but what I'm going to do first is get this stay stitched to this neck edge, and then we're going to construct the collar. Right, so the collar construction should be fairly straightforward because it's like any other collar. I've got my interfaced piecing, which will be the facing side, and then this is going to be the right side. So I am going to put them right sides together, and then I'm going to stitch at 1 centimetre seam allowance from just in 1 centimetre from the bottom edge, because again that's going to be my seam allowance when I attach it to the blouse, and then I'm going to stitch at 1 centimetre seam allowance all the way around to about here. And then I'm going to trim that seam down, turn it and press it. So we'll get that done now. Right, so I've stitched around the outer edge of the collar, as I mentioned, right sides together, and I have just graded the seam using my pinking shears. I'm just going to snip into the curved edge just at up to my stitching line, just around these curved edges here. I've also pressed up the facing hem just by 1 centimetre along that edge, and then what we're going to do now is we are going to attach the collar right sides together, the blouse neckline. So this is why it's important to stay stitched, so that you don't stretch this out. So I'm now going to find the centre of my collar and the centre of the back of the blouse, pin that in place there, and then slowly pin it all the way around the collar. So we'll get that done next. Right, so the collar is now stitched on, and what I need to do now before I press up the bodice up into the collar, I just snip up to the stitching line all the way around the neckline where I've attached the collar, just so that it will lay nice and flat as I turn the collar over, and I'm going to hand stitch that down. So we'll get that done next. I've just snipped into the neckline all the way around so the neckline bends, and then I am now going to turn over the collar so it's wrong sides together. I've pressed the seam where the collar is attached to the neckline up towards the collar, and then we're just going to pin this down. Like so, and then I'm going to sit down and do these corner pieces really carefully because they need to be nice and neat. You get the idea. Then I'm going to hand stitch this to the inside of the bodice all the way around, and then give it a good press. So collar's on and it's looking really good. I am going to stitch up the side seams, I've decided, and then we will get the flounces in place. So I have pinned the flounces right sides together. Now again, the instructions tell you just to cut 2 flounces, 1 for each arm. However, I've done 4 so that I can stitch them together, and yeah, it just encloses the seams and I don't have to worry about doing a narrow hem. So I'm going to get this stitched first, and then I will stitch the underarm seam, which will be that one there, and then I'll stitch up the side seams, and then we'll be able to get the sleeves in, and we're almost done. Okay, so flounces are done. I have turned them the right way round and stitched them very much like I did the flounces for the front raglans. And then I have sewn them right sides together at the side seam there and just overlocked that seam to finish it. And then I have basted the armhole pieces together so that makes it easier for me to insert into the armhole. So I've stitched up the side seam as well on the blouse, and I'm now ready to, there's the armhole there, I'm ready to attach the flounce. So we're going to match up the underarm seam of the flounce to the underarm seam of the sleeve, right sides together, and then pin it all the way around, stitch, overlock, and then it's just going to be buttons and buttonholes. So there we have it. Blouse is almost done now. I've got the flounces on the sleeves and I'm really pleased with how they've gone in. They just look really, really pretty. So all I have to do now is do the buttonholes on the right front button placket and then stitch the buttons on the left hand side, and then I will try it on and fingers crossed it fits. So I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me today and learning a little bit about Russian patterns. And there's a number of websites that I'm going to link to down below of Russian pattern companies that you can go and check out that have got some amazing patterns on there. I have really sort of jumped into the rabbit hole with this now, and there's a number of patterns that I would really like to have a look at in more detail and experiment with. As always, it's, you know, this is the beauty of sewing, isn't it, that you can just have a go at these things. And I think that, you know, at the end of the day, this is how we learn, by choosing something that's, you know, a bit out of our comfort zone and just having a go at it. At the end of the day, all you're going to lose is a little bit of fabric and some time, but you're gonna gain so much knowledge. I hope you've enjoyed having a look at this blouse that I've made, and leave me a comment down below if you've got any questions about anything that I've discussed today in today's video, and I'll hopefully be back with you really soon. Take care, bye.